Get on the train before it leaves the station. The truth train is coming, gonna run them down, run them down.
Hello, Governor Evers. I'm here today speaking on behalf of Brendan Dassey, and I would, urge you to consider and grant clemency to Brendan Dassey. Some of the reasons why I do hope this is because, number one, Brendan, I don't understand how these investigators took a 16-year-old kid with a diagnosed SLP, and this was all on his school records, and they took this kid and went and fed him every crucial fact, and virtually every fact. Everything was suggested to Brendan, and that's obvious when you watch his interrogation. That's what Judge Duffin saw when he granted Brendan, when he ordered Brendan released. That's what he saw in the confession. A confession being fed to a kid who was not equipped to deal with it. Okay? Then it gets appealed and goes to a 3-judge panel at the 7th Circuit Court, where Brendan prevails 2-1 on a 3-judge panel. And it looks like an injustice is being set right. And finally we get to an en banc review, which the state appealed for, and it was granted at the 7th Circuit Court. And Brendan ended up losing 4-3. And when I tell you that Brendan Dassey's confession is nothing short of child abuse by those investigators, I'm not kidding. And I believe a lot of people have started to realize that there is a problem in our criminal justice system with the way that youth are getting, handled in our criminal justice system. And it's shocking just how often officers will find a kid who's not, mentally on par, generally 14 to 16 years old usually, and feed them a confession. It's all too common in our justice system at the moment. So I do hope you will help to correct an injustice when the 4 members of the en banc who voted against Brendan Dassey felt more of a loyalty to AEDPA than they did to children in our criminal justice system. I would like for you to send a message to those judges, because what has happened to Brendan is clearly unjust. There has been a very brilliant paper written by a professor at the Wisconsin School of Law, along with a speech-language pathologist, who got together and did an under-the-hood look at Brendan Dassey's confession. And what they find and point out and make clear is that this interrogation was not done in the way that interrogations are taught. You're not supposed to use a lot of yes or no questions. They did. And in a yes or no question, you're conveying a lot of information in the asking of it. And that was how they were able to essentially feed Brendan all the things that they wanted him to say under the guise of a question. So I do hope you and your people will take a look at this case. I do hope that you will eventually find that an injustice has been done and that you might see fit to correct it. Thank you for your time, Governor Evers, and happy birthday, Brendan Dassey. Hello there, folks. How you doing? Okay, happy birthday, Brendan Dassey. So what you just saw there at the beginning was my message to Governor Evers. So go look for that tweet over on Twitter. Put the link down below for you if you want to find it easily. Go over, like it, and hopefully he'll take a look at it. So that was basically my message that I hope you will listen to and consider. Obviously, it's Brendan's birthday, and let's talk about Brendan, right? It's tragic what's happened here. I mean, and I said in that video where I likened the fact that his interrogation was very much like child abuse, right? And see, I think our justice system should have more of an attachment to wanting to make sure that things like this instances like this that are so wrong don't happen. But no, somehow enough judges thought that their attachment to AEDPA was more important than making sure we don't commit child abuse in our criminal justice system. Yeah, that's where we are now. That's the world we're in now. It's more important to uphold a piece of legislation like AEDPA, which robbed every single American of their habeas rights. It's more important to hide and cower behind that than it is to stand up against child abuse. Yeah. So, it's unfortunate. And Brendan, we all are hoping Brendan's going to be able to get himself out of there. You know, I feel Brendan's going to have plenty of opportunities. I mean, one thing, Brendan loves playing video games. He'll be able to he'll start being able to do streaming himself playing. And I'm sure so many people will be playing with him. So many people will be interested in watching Brendan. He could probably support himself by doing something he loves. And that's why I'm actually hoping that he does get out, because there is so many people that care about him and everything, that I think he's, like I said, he'll be able to make enough money for him to live, you know, pretty well, I think, by being able to stream his gaming, which I think is something he's going to want to do kind of on his own. Once he gets out and sees all the new video games and starts playing, I think he's going to gravitate in that direction probably on his own. And I think it will be a good choice for him because, like I said, he'll be able to support himself. Anyway. So talking about Brendan's case, I mean, we all know the obvious problems. I brought up the paper written by the Wisconsin Law School professor and the SLP and the little under the hood analysis that they did. You know, it's that was a fascinating paper. The way they get in there and the way they showed like the percentage of yes or no questions compared to this percentage of, you know, open-ended questions, which should have been the highest percentage, and then like the percentage of multiple choice questions, which also convey a lot of information in the asking and in the giving of the multiple choices. You're conveying a lot of information, potentially a lot of information. And these were the primary methods used when it's very well known that interrogators are trained to ask open-ended questions. Mostly open-ended questions. Because you know what happens when you don't ask open-ended questions? Exactly what you're getting with the Brendan Dassey interrogation. You get a lot of people going, no, yeah, this kid was railroaded. This kid was coerced. That's what you get when you don't use primarily open-ended questions. When you suggest all of the facts to the person. If you suggest it all to them, how can we be sure of anything that he said? If you had to say it first, that's a problem. And that's what it is with Brendan's, interrogation. Wiegert and Fassbender are clearly feeding him things. I mean, look at the hood latch. The hood latch is like the perfect example. Right? Because they're again and again trying to suggest to him that Steve did something under the hood. Blah, 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 blah. To the point where they go, look, Brendan, seriously, we know Steven did something under the hood. And they just kept browbeating until eventually he goes, oh, okay, yeah, he went under there. He lifted it and he did something with the engine, Brendan gives a very general answer that is like not specific in any way. He's just guessing at what they want to hear, and it's so much is obvious about that. But then you think about the fact that what ends up happening with the hood latch DNA, it ends up being an astronomical amount of DNA from something that Stephen Avery should have just been touching to open the hood, right? Supposedly, if this is what happened. And look at how much DNA is there. It's way more. It's an astronomical amount of DNA that's on that hood latch, and that's why. And the amount is actually comparable to what you would get from like a buccal or a groin swab. That's what the amount is, common, is kind of on par with, is that. So that's why you have this situation where Brendan, after being browbeat, agrees that Stephen went and did something under the hood. And then we get 1.9 nanograms of Stephen's DNA on the hood latch. And throughout all experiments, nobody can get anywhere near that amount of DNA left on the hood latch just by opening it, just by touching it. And so the astronomical amount kind of shows that the investigators were knowingly feeding him the information, because they were even willing to go and use a groin swab and switch it with the hood latch swab so that it basically became the hood latch swab. And that's why we have an astronomical amount of DNA on the hood latch, right? Anyway, these are all things that go further to prove that Brendan is innocent. He had no idea what was going on. He was guessing, and most of the information that they wanted to hear, they were feeding to him. They had their narrative already in mind. They just didn't have the proof. So they fed it to Brendan, did a press conference, and the rest is history. Right? Because basically, there's no proof of rape, no proof of... There's so much that there's not proof of, but that confession, it stayed with the public. Let's see, what was it? All but one of the jurors in the questionnaires that were originally sent out for the jurors in the Avery case, all but only one of them came back and said that they thought Stephen might not have done it. Every single other questionnaire, they all already had decided that Stephen was guilty. That's what the press conference did. Okay? That's why they did what they did to Brendan. So that they could convince the public in the arena of public opinion, and then they knew that would carry into the courtroom. Right? And that's what they were doing with Brendan. So, it's unfortunate. It's obvious, though. Especially when you think of what was happening leading up to March 1st. Right? Fassbender and Wiegert were browbeating Jody, trying to get Jody to make incriminating statements about Stephen, and doing all those things. And when she eventually told them to kick rocks and and told the jail, don't let them in anymore, I don't want to talk to them, so don't let them in. And once she did that, they couldn't get in to talk to her anymore. All of a sudden, their sights set on the Dassey boys. And then they zeroed in on Brendan, fed him a confession that they wanted, and gave them the storyline and the narrative that they wanted out there, and then they went and put it out there. There's so many injustices when it comes to what they did with Brendan, and I don't know how Fassbender and Wiegert sleep at night, considering what they did. Nothing that Brendan said came from Brendan, except for a couple of things that he said that were very general and guesses. He was guessing. Oh yeah, he stabbed her. Oh yeah, he raped her. They were suggesting rape. That's why he eventually said rape. They were beating around the bush about rape. I'm sure they mentioned rape over at Fox Hills in the whole time we have at Fox Hills that's not recorded, not in any way is it recorded. It was just time that investigators spent with the Dassey boys, particularly Brendan. So we have no idea what prepping might have happened there with Brendan. And they would have known right then. Them claiming that they didn't realize Brendan had a problem is also another thing that makes them look absolutely, like villains. Because if you're going to tell me that in the contact you had with Brendan, you weren't concerned that he might maybe possibly have like a learning disability or something of that nature, that you didn't care, that you plowed forward saying, you know what, don't ask. If I don't ask, then I can't see it, putting your blinders on, that's what you did, Fassbender and Wiegert. Yeah. There's so many things that are wrong with what they did to Brendan. Absolutely. And yeah, so hopefully Governor Evers will see the merit in it, and hopefully, and I know it's a long shot, I know it's not something that happens a lot, especially in Wisconsin. Governors don't generally tend to pardon or grant clemency to someone like Brendan, who's been convicted of the crimes that he's been convicted of. But hopefully the merits of this case will speak to Governor Evers. Governor Evers has a background in education. He cares about kids. So, it could be that realizing that Brendan was diagnosed with an SLP, that, and these sort of things that should have been, these investigators should have been realizing and getting this information from the school before they did what they did. And they didn't do that. Otherwise, they would have, the interrogation tactics should have been completely different. So, that's about it for today. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. And happy birthday, Brendan.